say that there isn't necessarily a right way to do it. I would say that, if you're trying to figure out what to do as a startup and where to start, the most important thing you can do is start. And if you can get 80% of the way there, then oftentimes that remaining 20%, like let's say that remaining 20% is uh, the gap between where you're at and a perfect answer, a perfect product, a perfect sales pitch. Oftentimes that 20% is more of a nice to have than the 80% of actually having something there.
Hey everyone, this is Devin Miller here with another episode of the Inventive Journey. I'm your host, Devin Miller, the serial entrepreneur that has built several startups into 7- and 8-figure businesses, as well as the founder and CEO of Miller IP Law, where we help startups and small businesses with their patents and trademarks. And today we have another great guest on the podcast, Sam Norton. To give you a bit of an introduction to him. So Sam has always kind of been an entrepreneur. He was, never had the courage to make the leap on his own until his brother and some other co-founders kind of reached out to him. The timing was right. And so after he graduated from BYU and Go Cougars, and looked at some of the digital slide decks and billboards and other things out there, I think he mentioned, and we'll get into it, that it started out as something to do with the capstone project, graduated, dived in, and then has been doing the startup life ever since. And so with that much as an introduction, welcome onto the podcast, Sam.
Hey, thanks, Devin. It's good to be here with you.
So I gave kind of a brief introduction, but taking us now back in time to when you got going, give us a bit of that backstory of how things got going for you.
Yeah, okay. Great, Devin. So, as you mentioned, things for Slide Tech really started when my brother and our third co-founder, Kevin, were in their last semester at BYU during their Master's of Information Systems program. And they started kind of fiddling around with this idea. And my brother, who was a student at the time, was kind of up in front of a classroom and giving his presentation to the class. And he just kind of looked out and he saw laptop after laptop after laptop is just a sea of, apples looking at him. And he just realized that nobody was paying attention, nobody was listening, and kind of felt like, what most professors I think feel like in a classroom setting, where it's really tough to understand whether or not somebody is paying attention. And in today's digital age, there's really no reason why that laptop, that second screen, can't be used to help somebody wander deeper into the presenter's content and enhance the presentation rather than be a distraction or a deterrent. And that's kind of where the idea of Slide Tech was born. My brother called me and told me what he thought about the idea. And I thought it was a great idea. And we kind of poked around for a couple of months, settings
So
and
now
classroom
jumping in,
settings.
what were you doing at the time? So your brother he was doing his capstone, he was in school. Where were you at, or what were you doing?
Yeah, I was working for a company called Pluralsight. They're a technology company based out of Utah that helps technology teams upskill their workforces. And so I was already a little bit familiar with kind of the remote learning use case. And so we've kind of tried to leverage some of that background in building out Slide Tech. I'd been graduated for about 3 years from BYU by the time
So
we kind of
and just as the backstory, so what did you graduate in at BYU, or what did you study?
Yeah, I was a marketing major at
Okay.
BYU in the Marriott School of Business.
So if I were to summarize, so you went to BYU, got your marketing major, graduated, and been working for Pluralsight for about 3 years. And during that, as you're working in Pluralsight, your brother does this presentation for Capstone, has a realization that nobody pays attention to the slide decks unless they're really cool, or presentations, and how to make that more interactive. He reaches out to you, and was that hey, this is a great idea, let me quit my job tomorrow and we're going to go all in? Or how did that conversation go, or how did it start to evolve from there?
Well, it's funny because if you know me and my brother, we have an idea probably a week where we just kind of talk about things. We just kind of, explore different concepts and different business cases and use cases. It's kind of like what we do for fun. Honestly, it's, I don't know, deprived childhood or something. But we basically just would kind of spitball back and forth on various ideas. So it wasn't like it was uncommon or like something out of the blue for him to call me and say, "Hey, I got this idea." That was kind of
Mm.
a weekly cadence for us.
Mm.
And it didn't really start to take shape or take form until we started getting some of that initial validation and traction from people who said that they would actually use something like this.
Mm. So now, so he pitches you, almost on a weekly basis of your ideas, kind of what he has, the idea of the week, so to speak. And it sounds like you toss it around, you kind of mull it over, but you continue to work at your job, obviously during that time in Pluralsight. So what was
Yeah.
different about this idea, or how did you start to say, okay, this has some momentum to it, or we'd like to actually start to do something with it, as opposed to, hey, that's a cool idea, and now I'm going to go back to my job type of a thing.
Yeah, good question. I think really what set this one apart is it gave us a little bit of inspiration, the fact that people were actually getting excited about the idea with us.
Mm.
So I would, talk to my colleagues at Pluralsight about it. And, I would say, yeah, what do you think about this? What do you think about this kind of idea? Is this a problem that you see too? And
Mm.
people would, I mean, I got to be honest with you, Devin, and I'm not, I mean, it wasn't my idea. It was Matt's idea. So
Mm.
I can boast about him, but I've literally never had anybody tell me that it's a bad idea. I
Mm.
mean, if you think about what a slide deck is right now, it is maybe the most underutilized and under resourced um, presentation or business tool that we have, especially for how ubiquitous they are. You know what I
Mm.
mean? And so every time that we talk to somebody about, look, like we can make the slide decks interactive. So it's actually like a two-way feedback type channel where you can interact with it, you can do what you want with it. And then we
Mm.
track those interactions and send them back to the presenter in real time so that the presenter knows what content actually matters and what content really resonates. That is something that I think a lot of people understood really quickly.
Mm.
And I think that's probably what made the idea a little bit different. I will say that there's still always that kind of leap of faith
Mm.
component to it. Even though we had people telling us it was a good idea, even though we had people who said that they wanted to use it and, agreed to be beta users and things like that, there's still that, feeling in your stomach where you're like, all right, if we're going to do this, we got to do this. And
So, to
yeah,
dive in, so now he comes and say, okay, finally I found an idea that I can get behind with my brother, and it's a good idea, and I think it's one that we should put some time and effort behind. Did you, how did that transition work? Did you continue to work at Pluralsight and do this as a side gig for a period of time? Did you say, okay, I'm quitting my job tomorrow and I'm going to be doing this full time, and we'll figure out how to, move back in with the parents, and we'll live on passion, not on money, and those type of
yeah.
things? Or how did you make that transition from working at Pluralsight to, hey, I'm going to go or do this as a startup with my brother?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I continued to work at Pluralsight for a little while we kind of tested the idea and vetted the idea. But as soon as we decided to actually make it a company, I quit. I felt like it would be um, kind of disingenuous to Pluralsight and to Slide Tech if I were trying to do both at the same time. I know that's a viable thing that
Mm.
people do, and they have the side hustle and things like that. But I'm a very single track kind of minded person, like very focused. Where if I'm doing multiple things, I feel like I can't do them as well, and so I
Mm.
just decided um, for me personally, it made more sense to just have one thing, pursue one thing or the other. And I felt like Slide Tech was a big enough opportunity that it would be worth it. And we definitely did the live on passion, not money type of thing.
Mm.
We actually did move back in with my parents. It was a bit of a lifestyle change. Fortunately, my wife got a big promotion at her work, and that kind of helped on the personal financing side. But yeah, we've definitely been in the passion, not money mode,
Mm.
and fortunately are starting to see things start to turn a little bit.
So no, and I think that there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. And, that's always the hard thing when you're at a startup, or any business is, how do we afford this? Do we try and do this as a side gig? If you do it, you have split attention and you never have enough time to really get it going. And the opposite, if we dive all in and we don't have the, if it doesn't work out or, doesn't make the money, then what do we do next? And so I always think that that's a balance. So now you dive in, you said, okay, we're going to go back to the parents. You convince the wife that, hey, we're going to do a bit of a lifestyle change. I think in the long run, I'll be happier, we'll be more financially set, or, the different motivations to go into a startup. So how is that, how has that gone since then? Was it all you thought it would be? And, you got in, you dived in, you built something and it took off like wildfire and you're making lots of money. Has it been a difficult up and down roller coaster? Has it been still too early to tell, or kind of where are you guys at?
Yeah, great question. I should mention too that there were a couple of different factors that also allowed us to kind of make that jump. And those were provided by BYU and the University of Utah.
Mm,
So I've never started a company in Silicon Valley. I'm sure it's wonderful, but I genuinely can't see how it gets better than
mm,
starting a company in Utah. Between those two universities, we had entrance into two incubator programs. They gave us money, they gave us resources, they gave us mentorship. I mean, it really was kind of stacked in our favor, I think, because of the resources that this community um, has kind of collectively agreed to put back into budding startups. So I would say that that definitely helped kind of push us over the edge and kind of help push us into this journey.
mm,
Um, so to answer your question about whether or not it's everything we thought or anything like that, it's definitely different than what I thought. When I was in high school, I played two different sports. So I played
mm,
football and then I wrestled. And um, I would say, like, if you're a football player and you're one of 11 people on the field on your team, then you can miss a tackle and somebody else can come in and kind of clean things up.
mm,
um, Wrestling is a little different, right? It's just you and one other person, and if you mess up or do the wrong move or flip the wrong way or whatever, it's kind of on you, and it's on you to get that back.
mm,
A startup is a lot more like wrestling, a
mm,
lot more like wrestling, where if you forget to reach out to a prospect, or you know slips your mind in the product or something like that,
mm.
it's on you to go fix it and to go make it happen again. um, and I would say that that is something that was a little bit of a transition, going from Pluralsight, a company with thousands of employees, to
Mm.
uh, just being me and my brother and Kevin, and it's really on us.
No, and I think that's the bittersweet thing, right, of doing your own thing. In the one sense, you're able to say, "Hey, I can finally make the decisions. I don't have to go through all of the bureaucracy. I don't have to go through months of waiting and budgets and time and getting approvals. And I can just we think of something, we can implement it, and we can get going on it." But on the other sense is there isn't a shield, there isn't anybody to duck behind, there isn't a team or anything else. If you do it, or as you point, if you miss it, either way, it's on you, and you bear that responsibility, which can be exciting and horrifying all at the same time.
Yeah, yeah, you get it. That's exactly right.
So now you've jumped in. You've been doing this for a period of time. You've had some good luck with the universities around here. You've been working on it. You've been getting going. So now, where do you see kind of the next 6 to 12 months taking you guys? Is it, hey, we're pivoting for COVID and we're waiting for schools to reopen, or hey, now because schools are closed and they're doing more Zoom meetings and slide decks and that than in person, it's picking up and we're gonna focus on that and really hit the market hard? Or kind of where do you see the next phase going for you guys?
Yeah, it's definitely picking up because of COVID, I think. There are a lot of professors who have taught the same way for a long period of time. And now this pandemic happens, and either they're doing things remotely or they're doing things in a hybrid setting where you've got a third of the class or smaller that's in person and everybody else is on Zoom. And it kind of creates this interesting thing where most professors have Zoom and then they share their screen and that's kind of it. And we've started to see that professors, and not only, I should say, not just universities, but also high schools and K through 12, um, engagement is really dropping in a lot of classrooms, and it's tougher to get kids to class, and it's tougher to get them engaged when they're actually in class.
Mm,
And so we've actually seen that our solution is really adept at solving these issues
mm,
because the not only because it improves the audience experience where they can take notes and ask questions and add other people's comments and questions to their notes, and kind of just makes it a little bit more collaborative of a class.
mm.
But on the other hand, the professors can also see, if students are able to really understand certain concepts, if they're really engaged in the class at all. And so that's been really, really valuable for professors who
Mm.
have been hit hard by this pandemic and are using slides.
No, and I think that makes complete sense. I mean, I think it is a paradigm shift, and it'll be interesting at some point. At least my personal belief, COVID will die down, or it will end. We'll either get a vaccine, or people will get it enough. Eventually, a normalcy will return. Don't know when that exactly will be, but it'll be interesting to see how that now, whether the dynamic sticks and whether they continue to do more online, or whether that is a phased approach, or if they go back to just what they knew, and how that will all play out, I'm sure is a bit of an uncertainty, and it'll make for an opportunity as to play a role in that, as to what that might look like now that we've kind of been forced into a different dynamic, and how that can maybe improve and be made better.
Yeah, it's funny because the idea for slide tech actually started before the pandemic
Mm,
really, really picked up. I mean, I think it was kind of happening in China a little bit, and you kind of hear some whisperings of
mm,
it, but I mean, nothing like the full force gale winds that are going on right now. So,
mm.
um, you know, originally we thought this was going to be kind of an in-person tool, um, and then we just happened to find that the use case really exploded as a result of remote learning.
No, and sometimes, hey, that makes the most sense. Some things are fortuitous, and some things, what was interesting is a little bit, I always get asked, with the law firm, hey, are things slowing down, are they picking up, where are you guys at, and fortunately, my typical answer is no, we're doing versus March, April, and that we've actually picked up, and we're busier than before before March and April. But it was really more because we set it up that we're a national or firm that we can meet with clients from anywhere, and we really set that up well ahead, not anticipating COVID, but just saying, hey, we'd like to not just be a local firm, or not just do the people right in our area. And then it's worked out well that now, as people are doing COVID, as they're not going to their local law firm and going downtown, they're looking to say, hey, what is the best provider, regardless of where they're located, because I'm not going to meet them in person anyway. So it's interesting how sometimes the unforeseen pivots or unforeseen occurrences, if you're smart and take advantage of them, can actually be a blessing, or at least provide for a good pivot.
Yeah, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's headwinds and tailwinds a
Yep.
lot of the times, and these macroeconomic forces really do have an effect on the smaller startups.
Yeah, no, definitely. So now, as we start to wrap up the podcast or reach towards the end of it, I always have two questions I ask at the end. So we'll jump to those now. So the first question I always ask is, so throughout your journey, what's been your worst business decision, and what have you learned from it?
Yeah, great question. And I've been kind of thinking about this, Devin, ever since you told me that you were going to ask this, and I've really tried to think through what that would be. And I've
Mm,
come to the conclusion that a non-decision is still a decision, right? I
mm,
couldn't think of a decision that we made that ended up being a big mistake or anything like that, but I can think of things that we didn't do that would have been a tremendous boon for our company. And one of those things has to do with spending money.
mm,
And it sounds a little crazy, right? Because you're starting this company, you're bootstrapping, you're you're taking a personal financial risk and things like that. But I think that startup finances and personal finances are different. They're different kinds of things. And uh, in personal finances, you wouldn't necessarily say, okay, spend more, because it'll help you in the future, right?
Mm,
But from a startup side, when you're thinking about what you can do with your money, really the only thing that your money is there for is for you to make more money with it later. That's
mm,
it. You're not buying, uh, plush offices or anything like that. Like when you're in startup world, like you are trying to figure out, okay, what's the return that I can get for this dollar? And I think if you approach it with that frame of mind, you'll spend your money a little bit faster and a little bit earlier and a little bit more methodically.
mm,
And so I would actually say the thing that we could have done better was spend our money earlier and spend our money faster, and spend our money more deliberately.
mm,
Um, I think that actually, we kind of were approaching it with the personal finance lens a little too much still, where we
mm.
were thinking, about preservation and cash preservation and things like that. And truthfully, if you want a slice, you got to roll the dice. And I would say spending more money up front is a good way to make sure that you're going to have money to spend later.
No, and I think that that's, that one's it's a hard thing to find the right balance, because if you spend all your money right out of the chute and you're saying, hey, we've got to spend money to make money, and you spend it all and then you don't have enough runway to ever get the product out, then then your business never takes off. And yet on the opposite side, if you miser it so much, you can actually hinder the growth of the business, because you're saying, hey, we're so conservative, we're passing over opportunities, or otherwise not taking advantage of opportunities, or growing or exploring new markets or reaching new customers, and you're actually foregoing that. And so I think, to your point, sometimes by not making the decision, or by holding off, or by not doing things, it can be as detrimental to a business, or it can hold it back as much as anything else. So I like that.
Yeah, and just to be clear, I'm not saying spend recklessly by any
Mm.
means. I'm saying spend deliberately, be really methodical about how you do it, but understand that if you pull the trigger earlier rather than later, you'll have the results of that spend earlier rather than later.
Yeah, no, and I think that that is the balance, right? Don't spend recklessly, but don't hold on to your cash such that now you're not going to be able to grow the business. And I think that's a balance that everybody makes. And you either typically you learn the lesson one way or the other, right? Either you learn the lesson because you spent all the money and you run out of money, and now you're trying to have to figure out how to fund things, or you hold on to it too tightly, and then you're saying, "Oh, I could have done more things, and I wish we'd started this earlier." And so it's a hard lesson to learn. Everybody almost has to learn that balance. Well, as we now jump to the second question, which is, now if you're talking to someone that's just getting into a startup or a small business, what would be the one piece of advice you'd give them?
Yeah, the piece of advice that I would give somebody, um, who is doing a startup is I would say that there isn't necessarily a right way to do it. I would say that, if you're trying to figure out what to do as a startup and where to start, the most important thing you can do is start. And if you can get 80% of the way there, then oftentimes that remaining 20%, like let's say that remaining 20% is uh, the gap between where you're at and a perfect answer, a perfect product, a perfect sales pitch. Oftentimes that 20% is more of a nice to have than the 80% of actually having something there. So if you're trying to decide between, building a feature and not building a feature, and you can do it in a relatively risk-free way where you're not, you know, mortgaging your entire business to actually do it, I would say ship the feature, you know?
Mm,
And if you're trying to figure out, should I talk to this person about my product or should I talk to this person about my product? You should just talk to both people about your product. So I think that there's more that than can be done. They say 70% of success is showing up, and I think that that's absolutely true in the startup space.
no, and I think that's great advice, and I think that certainly makes sense. Well, as we wrap up, if people want to reach out to you, they want to find out more about, Slide Tech, they want to be a customer, they want to be an investor, they want to be an employee, they want to be your next best friend, any or all of the above, what is the best way to connect up with you or find out more?
Yeah, find me on LinkedIn. My name is Samuel Norton. The company is called Slide Tech. And you can also shoot me an email. It's slidekick, SLIDEKICK, Sam at gmail.com. Feel free to shoot me an email or connect with me on LinkedIn.
Perfect. Well, I think that that's a great way. Certainly invite people to connect up with you and find out more. Use your product and get to know get to know you guys better at Slide Tech. So, and I appreciate so Sam, I appreciate you coming on. Now is for anybody else that's a listener. If you have your own journey to tell and you'd like to be a guest on the podcast, feel free to reach out to us at inventivejourneyguest.com and apply to be on the podcast. Love to hear your story. If you are a listener, make sure to click subscribe so you hear or get notifications as all the new awesome episodes come out. And last but not least, if you ever need help with patents and trademarks, feel free to reach out to us at Miller IP Law. We are always here to help. Thanks again, Sam. Appreciate you coming on.
Thanks, Devin. Thanks for having me.
Hey, if you enjoyed this episode of The Inventive Journey, make sure to go and check out Startups Magazine. They're an awesome magazine and podcast centered over in the UK. And if the magazine is a digital and print magazine where they focus on tech startups and entrepreneurs, and they also have a focus on female founders and women in tech. So if you want to check out their magazine, either digital or print, it's Startups Magazine, startups with an S, magazine.co.uk. And you can also look up their podcast, which is called The Serial Entrepreneur. So go check them out. They're awesome. And definitely, if you like this episode, you'll like them.